I just sold the most expensive car in my dealership. So in this video, I started with a pickup truck and this parking lot. And now my goal is to turn it into a profitable dealership and hopefully not go bankrupt. Will I be able to do it? Stay tuned to find out. And if you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps. Alright, let's build a business, guys. I headed to the property that was soon to become mine. When I arrived, the current owner was already waiting for me. To be honest, I was surprised. The lot was filled with trash, and everything was overgrown with grass and bushes. But I actually saw that as a plus. In this condition, I could negotiate a lower price. In the end, I offered the owner $15,000, and he agreed. Now, the property was officially mine. The first thing I decided to do was inspect what was on the site. All I saw were piles of garbage, an old playground, and a basketball court. It looked like people used to play sports here, but judging by the condition, that was a long time ago. Without wasting time, I got to work. First, I needed to cut down the bushes, so I headed to the store to buy a chainsaw, and once I returned, I got straight to work. I carefully stacked all the cut branches by the roadside to later transport and sell them at the sawmill. After a while, all the bushes were gone, and the area was already looking much better. That made me really happy. Then I started clearing out the garbage. I sold all the metal items and got some money for them. After that, I dismantled the old playground and basketball court. I used construction mode to remove all the grass that had grown through the asphalt. Now the entire area was cleared. Next, I started fencing off the territory. Along the roadside, I placed concrete blocks and also put up a John Deere banner, a small but steady source of ad revenue. Around the perimeter, I installed light poles with good lighting and extra spotlights for the banners. Next, I needed to remove the cut wood as it was getting in the way. I loaded it into the back of the pickup and took it to the sawmill. I made $400 from that trip. Once back home, I started marking out a parking area to create a convenient space for our equipment. In the center of the lot, I also installed several poles for better lighting. Now everything was ready and we could start purchasing equipment and then reselling it. I got into our pickup truck and headed to check out the first listing. When I arrived, I was met by a man selling a very old pickup. The vehicle looked terrible. Dented body, crumpled cab, and the rear window was shattered. Honestly, I even doubted whether it could run at all. However, when I started the engine, to my surprise, it ran fairly well. After a bit of negotiation with the owner, I managed to buy the truck for just $500. Loading it onto our trailer wasn't easy, but I managed to do it right there on the spot. I made sure to strap it down properly so it wouldn't shift during transport. Everything was ready, and we headed back to our shop. Once we arrived, I parked the pickup in its place and immediately went out to look for the next piece of equipment. This time, I got lucky. The seller turned out to be the owner of a neighboring lot we had recently purchased. He was selling a pretty decent off-road pickup truck. Its condition was far better than the previous one. High clearance, large tires, and overall much better shape. But once I started the engine, it became clear that it had some minor engine issues. Still, after some bargaining, I managed to buy it for just $8,000. I think that once we clean it up and do some minor repairs, we'll be able to sell it for a much higher price. At first, I wasn't sure it would fit on our trailer, but I managed to squeeze it on and strap it down securely. Back at the lot, I unloaded the off-roader and noticed we already had a small collection of vehicles ready for resale. Since it was already getting dark, I decided to call it a day and get some rest. The next morning, I decided to install a banner with the name of our shop. Each banner cost me $5,000. After that, I started thinking about buying a washer, since nearly all the equipment we purchased was in dirty condition, which significantly reduced its value. I went to the store and bought a pressure washer for a little over $4,000. I loaded it into our pickup truck, returned home, and set it up next to the newly acquired machines. I immediately began cleaning. And after the wash, both vehicles looked much better, meaning they were now worth more. However, we still didn't have enough equipment, so I went out again, searching through listings. This time, I met a serious-looking man who was selling an old Ford Shelby sports car. It was a rare model with a powerful engine, but it was completely non-functional. I decided to take the risk and bought it for $12,000. Hoping to restore and sell it to a collector. Since we didn't yet have the proper transport for it, I left the car with the seller for the time being. My next find was an old pickup truck. Fortunately, it was still running, so without much hesitation, I bought it for $1,500, loaded it onto the trailer, and took it to our parking lot. When I arrived, a man was already standing near our equipment. Turned out he wanted to buy the off-road truck. We negotiated a bit, and I managed to sell it for just over $20,000, nearly twice what I had paid. I decided to invest the profit into equipment for transporting non-functional vehicles, since we couldn't pick them up otherwise. I then washed the newly delivered pickup and decided to hire an employee to handle sales, while I focused on buying new vehicles. After the successful deal, our balance had reached nearly $30,000. With that money, I bought a flatbed truck with a crane and cover, so we could load vehicles that couldn't drive onto the platform on their own. After the purchase, we only had $900 left, but I was confident we'd make it back quickly. I headed out in the new truck to pick up the sports car I'd previously left with the seller. Upon arrival, I set up the supports and carefully began the loading process. I had to be extremely cautious not to damage the body, otherwise the car's value would drop significantly. Everything went smoothly. The car was pretty well known, so a small crowd gathered to watch the process. Once secured, I removed the supports and brought the car to our lot. The next acquisition was a wrecked car from an accident. I didn't pay anything for it since it was in terrible condition. Lifting it with the crane wasn't easy. The truck even started leaning to one side. I had to reposition for better stability. It was tough, but I managed to get it onto the lot. After that, I bought another rusty pickup for $1,000. It looked a bit better than our very first one, so I considered the price fair. Once delivered, my employee told me that all the vehicles on display had already been sold. In total, we earned just over $15,500. I decided to spend that money on building a ramp for repairing vehicles. First, I needed to cut down 2 trees that were in the way. I carefully felled them, cut the logs, and used the crane to load them onto the truck. It turned out to be quite a large load of timber, and after delivering it to the sawmill, I made nearly $10,000. Before I even got home, I received an offer to buy a wheel loader. Despite some damage, it was still operational, and such equipment is expensive. I paid $18,000 and loaded it onto the flatbed. Heading back, I successfully delivered the wheel loader. The truck didn't even tip over, though it was a close call, and unloaded it at the parking lot. Then I started setting up a repair area. For $720, I built a ramp for servicing vehicles and laid a road leading up to it. Once everything was ready, I drove our Ford Mustang Shelby onto the ramp. It was already getting dark, so I postponed the repair and went to rest. The next morning, I immediately got to work. Repairing the Ford cost nearly $3,000. When everything was finished, I decided to take it for a spin, and to my surprise, the car ran perfectly. After that, I headed to the car wash, cleaned off all the dirt thoroughly, and now we had a true gem for sale. A classic Ford Mustang Shelby sports car, in excellent condition, with a fully restored engine. I was sure we could sell it for a very good price, but I couldn't stop at just one repair. With the remaining money, I managed to restore 2 more pickups. However, the wheel loader repair was going to cost $10,000, so I had to put that off for now. To increase the variety of vehicles in our shop, I went out shopping again. First, I stumbled upon an ATV near a transformer box. The electrician working there had no idea how it got there and agreed to sell it for $500. Without asking too many questions, I loaded the ATV into the truck and moved on. The next find was a motorcycle. I bought it for just $250 from a man sitting on a bench. I loaded it onto the truck as well and returned to the store. While I was gone, the worker had managed to sell several vehicles, earning us $19,000. That was enough to finally repair the wheel loader. Now we had another expensive and useful piece of equipment. I parked it in the lot and unloaded the recently bought ATV and motorcycle near the repair area. Then I headed out of town to a farm where a combine harvester was for sale. The road was long, but I eventually met the farmer, who pointed me to an old combine in the backyard he no longer needed. He agreed to sell it for $10,000. The machine started up easily, and I loaded it onto the truck without any problems. When I got back, I unloaded the combine at the parking lot. To my surprise, while I was away, the worker had already repaired and cleaned both the ATV and the motorcycle. Even more impressive, he had sold our sports Shelby for a whopping $64,000. That was incredible. Now we had serious capital for future purchases. Without hesitation, I headed to a nearby farm just outside the city. There, 2 tractors were up for sale, one of which was in fairly good condition. The owner also offered a truck with a trailer that had gotten stuck in a swamp. It was fully loaded, so the price was only $20,000. The offer was too good to pass up, and I agreed. I paid $30,000 for all the equipment. Then I loaded both tractors onto our truck, secured them tightly with straps, and took them to the repair area. All the while, I was already thinking about how to pull our new truck and trailer out of the swamp. After that, I decided to rent a large crane to retrieve our truck that was stuck. The rental cost me $20,000, but I'm confident that even selling just one trailer will easily cover that expense. The crane required a counterweight to operate, so I picked up a 7-ton weight and loaded it onto our truck. That should be enough. Then I headed to the location where our truck was stuck. Upon arrival, I began unfolding the crane and preparing it for work. First, I attached the counterweight from the truck bed to ensure stability during the lift. By the time I had hooked up the truck, it had gotten quite dark outside, so I decided to call it a day and continue the job in the morning. The next day, I headed back to the site first thing. After inspecting the crane, I noticed it wasn't standing very steadily, so I had to reposition it closer to the truck. First, I carefully hooked the truck itself to pull it slightly out of the water and detach the trailer. Even for such a large crane, it was too heavy to lift the fully loaded truck all at once. I managed to pull the truck out a bit, unhook the trailer, and then fully lift the truck out of the water. I gently placed it back on the road, then backed my transport vehicle underneath and lowered it onto the trailer. After securing it with straps, I drove the truck back to our lot to start the repairs. Once there, I pushed it off the trailer and immediately ran over to our worker. He had just sold the loader and we got $95,000 for it. An excellent deal. I returned to the truck, pulled it to the repair zone with the crane arm and fixed it. The repair cost $6,000. Now the truck was fully operational. Before heading back to the farm, I gave it a good wash and it looked as good as new. Then I went back to retrieve the trailer. With the crane, I was able to pull it out of the swamp and hook it up to the truck. Inside the trailer was grey, but it had gotten completely soaked. There was no point in trying to sell it anymore, so I just dumped it back into the swamp. At least the fish would have something to eat. Once everything was done, I packed up the crane and returned it. I repaired the trailer, washed it, and listed it for sale. After that, I focused on upgrading our shop. I built a large workshop for equipment repairs. It cost $45,000, but now we could repair machinery faster and better. I also decided to build a small house next to the shop, since I'd been living in a tent for way too long. I fenced the entire property, and now our shop looked much more professional. We finally had a real used equipment dealership. There's still so much more ahead, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all next time.